When China suddenly launched 40 missiles in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, the world was stunned. But what no one expected was the response from the United States Navy. Without hesitation and without mercy, they unleashed a move that shocked the entire world. What really happened? On the morning of the 11th of June, 2025, a 70,000-ton Chinese aircraft carrier suddenly launched an attack on Guam, kicking off with a barrage of hypersonic missiles and fighter jets striking the U.S., most critical base in the Pacific. This wasn't a war simulation, it was a terrifying showdown that could tip the entire regional balance of power in an instant. Continuing its string of failures, China launched a desperate gamble to reclaim its lost pride. The Shandong aircraft carrier, their sole symbol of naval power, charged 1,800 miles into the Pacific with a bold order: destroy Andersen Air Force Base and prove they could bring war to America's doorstep. If you're watching this far, this channel is definitely your style. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button now. Moments later, a high-stakes battle of technology and nerves erupted. At 6:15 a.m., radar screens at Andersen lit up in blazing red, flooded with warning signals. Each alert was a chilling wake-up call. China was coming in with everything it had. The nightmare was rising from the horizon. Led by the Shandong and escorted by 5 modern warships, the Chinese Naval Strike Group charged straight toward Guam. This was no longer a patrol, it was payback for a wound that hadn't healed. Just months earlier, the USS Gerald R. Ford had leveled 15 PLA bases, leaving behind a graveyard of J-11S and J-16S worth billions of dollars. The physical damage was immense, but the psychological blow was even more devastating. Beijing's once celebrated anti-access systems were exposed as useless against the overwhelming power of U.S. aircraft carriers. A once mighty nation was now on the defensive, and China simply could not bear the humiliation. Determined to erase the sting of humiliation, Beijing threw the Shandong into a do-or-die mission. The objective was crystal clear: flatten the runways, torch American aircraft, and send a chilling message they could strike at the very heart of the United States. A reckless mission, but one fueled by China's fierce ambition. At 6:27 a.m., the deck of the Shandong turned into a roaring pressure cooker. 28 J-15 Flying Shark fighter jets took off one after another, armed with air-to-air missiles and precision-guided bombs. At the same time, 2 Type 055 destroyers launched 24 YJ-18B cruise missiles flying at Mach 3 and skimming the sea surface to punch through every American radar system. And it didn't stop there. 3 Type 052D destroyers fired another 16 YJ-12 anti-ship missiles designed to soar high, then dive like steel-tipped drills. In less than 8 minutes, over 40 advanced missiles were screaming toward Guam, while the squadron of J-15S formed an attack formation, ready to deliver a devastating 1-2 punch to the heart of Andersen Air Force Base. The silence over Guam shattered in an instant. Anderson wasn't just a base, it was the strategic backbone of U.S. power in the Pacific. Home to over 150 aircraft and 12 million gallons of jet fuel, its destruction would cripple America's entire regional posture. But the U.S. defense system was already locked and loaded. As the wave of Chinese missiles crossed the 200-mile mark, America's layered defense system roared to life like a caged beast. E-2D Hawkeye early warning aircraft swept the skies, feeding target data back to the Anderson command bunker and nearby Arleigh Burke destroyers. Every signal was a green light to fire. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss what happens next. The moment target data was transmitted, America's defense system responded like a perfectly programmed killing machine. Radars aboard the Arleigh Burke destroyers and Anderson's command center swiftly identified each YJ-18 and YJ-12 missile by speed, altitude, and flight path. Every target was death-tagged, setting the stage for a retaliatory barrage unlike anything ever witnessed. Not just in the skies off the coast of Guam, the destroyers USS John Finn and USS Ralph Johnson joined the fight. Their Aegis Baseline 10 combat systems came online, sinking 96 vertical launch cells, each loaded with a deadly weapon. America's fury was about to erupt at blistering speed, unleashing a firestorm over the Pacific like nothing the world had ever seen. Then, like thunder cracking over the sea, SM-6 interceptors roared out of their launch tubes, reaching Mach 3.5 in seconds. These warheads didn't just explode near their targets, they speared into them with raw, annihilating force. One strike meant instant death. At this point, the weapons were no longer defending, they were counterattacking at the edge of space. However, a few low-flying YJ-18 missiles slipped through the first shield. Instantly, America's second layer of defense snapped awake. ESSM Block 2 interceptor supersonic spears launched skyward. Using active radar homing, they hunted down targets autonomously, locking onto any threat that made it past. Speed, intelligence, and sheer destructive power all converged at once. But the nightmare wasn't over. China's final sea-skimming missiles dropped to razor-low altitudes, trying to slip beneath the radar horizon. But the RIM 116 rolling airframe system was already waiting. A barrage of infrared and radio-guided projectiles formed a fiery net, crisscrossing the sky and shredding the last wave of desperate intruders. Even so, a few missiles broke through, hurtling toward the base at terrifying speed. That's when the CIWS close-in defense system, the final, line roared to life. 6-barrel Gatling guns spun up, spitting out 4,500 depleted uranium rounds per minute, forming a tungsten wall of death. The last incoming missiles were obliterated in a storm of fire, with not a sliver of hope left. Across the entire battle space, America's autonomous command network pulled off the unthinkable. It fused satellites, aircraft, ground radar, and warships into a single, unified force. Every layer of defense activated without a moment's delay. And when the smoke cleared over the ocean, dozens of shattered Chinese missile fragments rained into the sea-silent witnesses to a lightning-fast counterstrike. China's preemptive strike had failed spectacularly, crashing headfirst into the most advanced defense network on Earth. With Guam still standing, it was now America's turn to strike back. Inside Anderson's command bunker, screens lit up as target data poured in from surveillance aircraft, satellites, and stealth drones. Everything was in place for the deadly counterstrike about to unfold. Across the entire battle space, intelligence platforms synced in real-time satellites, E-2D Hawkeye, P-8 Poseidon, and even MQ-25 Stingray UAVs. All fed data into a single grid of destruction, pinpointing the exact locations of the Shandong, its escorting destroyers, and the support vessels trailing behind. A steel hurricane was quietly building over the waves. Then, the order echoed through the top-secret comms network. Full strike priority target, aircraft carrier. From the ocean's depths, 2 Virginia-class nuclear submarines surfaced and opened their vertical launch tubes. Each unleashed a swarm of Tomahawk Block 5 cruise missiles naval assassins primed to rain down invisible fury upon the enemy. Immediately, the Tomahawks burst from their tubes, skimming just 30 feet above the ocean. Using terrain-matching tech and infrared image recognition, they weaved invisibly beneath China's radar net. In under 5 minutes, over 20 missiles were racing toward the Chinese fleet like vengeful phantoms rising from the deep. At the same time, from west of Guam, Arleigh Burke destroyers launched another wave of Tomahawks. These were pre-programmed to split mid-air, diving toward individual targets on each Chinese warship. Though the enemy fired back with HHQ-9 interceptors, the sheer volume of U.S. missiles was overwhelming. Storm of Steel was closing in fast. The U.S. didn't stop at firepower, they unleashed their electronic warfare ace. EA-18G Growlers stormed in, jamming China's fire control radars with powerful interference. Screens aboard the Shandong and its escorts went blinding. White target locks lost, weapons silenced. The entire fleet was now flying blind, helpless in the middle of a missile downpour. Amid China's chaos, the true executioners arrived. From the USS Ronald Reagan and Anderson Air Force Base, FA-18E, F Super Hornets launched into the sky, climbing to 35,000 feet before diving and unleashing a barrage of AGM-158 JASSM missiles. These stealth warheads were engineered to pierce flight decks and detonate deep inside the ship-sterning steel hulls into fireballs from within. But the assault wasn't over. F-35C Lightning II fighters entered the fight, acting as airborne brains. With their APG-81 radar and advanced multispectral sensors, they tracked every enemy ship in real time. As the missiles soared in, the F-35S continuously fed updated coordinates, ensuring no two warheads hit the same target. Each strike was bone-chillingly precise. Using the high-security Link 16 and MADL data networks, the F-35Cs shared real-time visuals of the entire battle space. Nothing could escape. Every missile knew exactly what to kill. And then, at 7:28 a.m., the deck of the Shandong turned into hell. Multiple warheads punched through the angled flight deck, detonating deep inside the aircraft hangars. A chain of explosions tore through everything. Fuel-packed J-15S erupted like firecrackers. Other Tomahawks slammed into Type O-55 destroyers, shredding radars and detonating ammunition bays. One Type O-52D listed hard to starboard before erupting violently, snapping in half and sinking beneath the waves. The destruction unfolded in a deadly, haunting silence. By 7:40 a.m., less than 30 minutes after the U.S. opened fire, the waters east of Guam had become a graveyard of steel. The Shandong aircraft carrier was engulfed in flames, listing heavily, thick black smoke pouring out like a bleeding wound. Once a symbol of China's naval pride, it now lay as a charred wreck in the silent ocean. By 8:10 a.m., the brutal truth was undeniable. The Shandong lay dead in the water, its deck warped, its aircraft scorched. Below deck, raging fires forced the crew to abandon ship. Over 800 sailors struggled in an oil-slicked sea, clinging to life, waiting for rescue, but who would come? Hope drifted like a ghost through the thick, choking smoke. Not far away, two Type O-55 destroyers lay crippled, their superstructures scorched to the bone. One slowly tilted and vanished beneath the waves. The reckless assault had cost China its main aircraft carrier, multiple billion-dollar warships, and dozens of fighter jets. But worst of all, over 1,500 sailors and pilots were dead or missing. A catastrophe beyond reckoning. In the midst of a bitter defeat, the real blow wasn't to the hardware, was to national pride. China once believed it had a modern navy, strong enough to challenge the United States. But after 90 minutes of hell, the entire carrier-based doctrine Beijing had spent a decade building crumbled like a sandcastle in a storm. That ending delivered a brutal warning. When you choose to strike directly at American power, you're gambling not just weapons but your nation's reputation. In this savage confrontation, China paid the price with everything it tried to prove. And the world watched that collapse undeniable and absolute. Hit subscribe today, and I'll bring you even more jaw-dropping videos like this.